I'm Donna Baines, the Director of the School of Social Work here at UBC Vancouver, and I'd like to very warmly welcome everyone here to the keynote address of our 90th Anniversary Fellow, Professor Stephanie Wahab. And to start tonight's proceedings, I'd like to invite Elder Bruce Robinson of the Musqueam people to give our acknowledgement of the land. So, Bruce.
OCM, sempre get sick of mana. We rely on the kick on to connect. Welcome to this year. A lot of people I always like to introduce myself in my traditional way. As you heard, Musqueam is my home. I belong to the longhouse there. And it's what they call the spirit dance. It's very powerful. Very powerful. It's an honor to be here tonight. As I sing my song, I'm going to honor all our ancestors. So as I sing my song, you pray in your heart in your own way for the things you're looking for yourself and for others. Empower them to heal themselves. minds of all our families. Touch their hearts, touch their minds, touch their spirit. Empower them to go through life in a good way. Empower them to heal themselves. I ask that you join us as one throughout Mother Earth. Join us as one in soul, heart, and mind. So we can uplift each other, to help heal each other, to have good understanding of each other. So we can walk in harmony with each other and walk in harmony with our beautiful and loving Mother Earth. Mother Earth, please forgive us for anything we've done to harm you in any way, Mother Earth. Please forgive us. And be kind and gentle to us when you bring back balance in this area, Mother Earth. Be kind and gentle to us. We love you and honor you, Mother Earth, for the sustenance of life. We love you and honor you, Mother Earth, for all our lives. So grateful for the people of these lands and the ancestors of these lands. So grateful for all our ancestors, for without them we would not be here today. So grateful for your guidance and your wisdom and your knowledge that you share openly with us every single day of our lives. Guide us well in the things we need to do for each other. Guide us well in the things we need to do for ourselves. Yeah. Thank you. They've only given me 3 hours to do this, so I'm going to fast. But thank you for being here tonight in the traditional territory of Musqueam. You know, and that. And as you hear in my prayer, I honor the people of these lands, the ancestors of these lands. It's all of our ancestors, because they're all here with us. It's an understanding of it. It's an understanding of how that they can help us when we acknowledge them, honor them. Same with Mother Earth. We only have one Mother Earth. One. So we have to take care of her. We have to. For all our children's children, all of ours, your children's children. We all live on one Mother Earth, and she's fighting back. And you know something? We're going to lose. We'll lose for sure. Okay? So take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Take care of your family. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Elder Bruce. That was beautiful. Your song was absolutely beautiful and a wonderful way to welcome everybody to this event and acknowledge the original and ongoing owners of this land. I'm very happy to see you all here today, and I bring all of you who are not faculty and staff at the UBC School of Social Work, I bring you all warm greetings from us as we mark the Social Work Month, International Social Work Month here in March. I'm relatively new to Vancouver, having moved here this summer, and it's really marvelous to get a chance to join people in this celebration of social work this month. So I'm just going to take a tiny moment to plug our brand new part-time PhD and our regular PhD program. We are the first part-time PhD at the University of British Columbia, so we're charting new ground, and we know that our social work community likes to use research and to be knowledge-based and theory-informed, so we want to invite you back to join us to go through this journey of building our part-time PhD together. Of course, we still have our full-time program. There's some handouts on the table at the back. Shoot me an email, ask any of the faculty here questions. We also have some great PhD students here tonight who I'm sure would also like to chat with you about the school. So just before I turn this over to our speaker, as many of you probably know, this is the 90th anniversary of the School of Social Work. We're the second oldest school of social work in Canada. I'm firmly claiming that ground. McGill believes it's the oldest school of social work, but I quibble with them. It's, you know, it's an archival kind of quibble, historical, knowledge-based quibble. That's mostly because I want to win. And they claim that they're older than us. They did start their program just slightly before us, but it wasn't called social work, so therefore we're social work program. And also, they're in a different part of the time zone, so they claim that, you know, they're like 3 hours older than us, but that doesn't really count, right? So anyways, here we are, the 90th anniversary, second oldest social work program in Canada. And to mark the occasion, last week we had a very successful symposium, international symposium, with 69 participants, submissions from 11 countries, and very high quality, top-notch research papers and posters. And it was so fun and interesting that we're thinking we'll do it again next year, and I hope that many of you will consider coming and submitting a workshop or a research paper and joining the fun. And another part of our 90th anniversary of the school involves looking back and looking forward, and we have many, many things to be proud of as we look back. But in the fine tradition of critical reflexivity, that's the center point of our discipline, when we look back over our 90 years of research and education, we can identify moments where we could have done better or we failed to embrace sufficiently critical and in-depth analyses, and we unintentionally ended up on the wrong side of various questions and the wrong side of history. So regrettably, there are moments in the history of social work where we uncritically joined the mainstream in ways that contributed to the harm experienced by a number of groups, including Indigenous peoples, racialized populations, LGBTQI2S people, women, people with disabilities, and other people experiencing what we now call wicked social problems, or complex, interwoven, hard to solve social, physical, and mental health problems. Later this year, in an event at UBC on September 25th, to which you're all invited, we will be issuing a statement of accountability and commitment to Indigenous peoples. As part of this process of critical reflection, we're working closely with many groups to ground our practice and theory in the struggles of people for dignity, equity, and fairness. And in short, we want to mark this 90th anniversary of the school by recommitting ourselves to standing on the right side of history, as well as the right side of all social issues. And by that, I don't mean the political right. I just want to be very clear. So as part of the reflexive practice, we developed a 90th anniversary video that I'm going to ask my colleague Kelly, there she is, I'm looking around for her, to come up and introduce it for us.
Thank you. My name is Kelly Allison, and I'm a faculty member here at the school. In thinking about the many ways to celebrate the 90th anniversary of the school, one idea was to take our inspiration from the University of Sydney and we thought that a promotional video highlighting the work we do here at the UBC School of Social Work would be a useful project. We wanted to highlight both the current quality work and learning that is occurring at the school, but also speak to how we know we could do better in relation to decolonizing social work education and working towards reconciliation. So I would like to thank all of the students and faculty members that were involved and participated in the making of this video and gave their feedback and guidance, and a big shout out and thank you to UBC Studios for their expertise in filmmaking and video production. So I hope you enjoy.
In a word, my experience at UBC has been pretty life-changing.
My time at the UBC School of Social Work has really helped me adapt and change into a person that I'm proud of today.
We take the idea of being a community of learners very seriously. As professors and faculty members, we learn from our students and we learn alongside them. So it's a journey that we're doing together.
Some of these students actually have been working as service providers within downtown east side. When they're coming to my class of addiction, they are coming with knowledge and experience from the field that's very current, and we exchange that in a classroom setting and learn from each other.
Mohammed's addictions course was something that I've been looking forward to. He has brought a really valuable perspective into the course because he speaks huge place of experience, but also a place of compassion and a place of non-judgmental teaching.
Students are always asking me for practical tools that they can use with clients. So for example, for my trauma-informed course, I have given them several examples of grounding techniques that they can use with their clients, especially when clients are in states where they're being triggered by reminders of their trauma.
Social work has as part of its code of ethics the value of social justice.
I see the social worker as being a catalyst for social change.
Our professors, they teach us things like feminist theory and critical race theory, and those really give us the lenses we need to analyze situations that our clients are in.
Bringing in that lens of what this means for the social conditions that are bringing rise to those issues that come up for them.
That's also made me, I feel, more effective as a practitioner because we can use those lenses to look at where social policy might be leaving certain families behind.
I viewed social justice as needing to be on a macro level of things, needing to impact like an entire country, and so it felt very overwhelming. Being at the School of Social Work here at UBC, I've realized that social justice is also done at micro levels, where it's one-on-one interactions. I have a better understanding of how to incorporate that into my practice.
I really see the practicum as kind of an opportunity for students to get socialized into the social work profession and to really get a sense of what it means to be a social worker. The second part is about experimenting with the different ideas that they're being taught in the classroom in a real field setting to see how these land.
We will work to alleviate immediate symptoms, but those symptoms will come back unless we can change policies and practices and organizations. So we try to teach students how to operate at a number of levels simultaneously.
We're looking also in different ways at the profession of social work, the role and some of the harms that have happened over the past years for the Indigenous populations, and really acknowledging that. And then how can we move from there? And all levels within the school, our director, all the way down to staff. Everyone is involved in the program.
This is a moment in the school where we have lots of promise and lots of potential. A huge willingness among the students and among the faculty to kind of bravely step into this space. There's all kinds of great projects like the Button Blanket project that Marie initiated.
I was really lucky to be able to participate with Elder Mar, who has made many button blankets, to kind of learn the different teachings about the blanket from her.
It actually gets the students together
and build a community. Everyone came together, and when I was there looking at it, I was thinking, this is how I vision working towards reconciliation. You know, like the reconciliation pole up here on campus, there's, I think it's the canoe to represent the Indigenous people, and the other, the long boat, to recognize the non-Indigenous people paddling together towards reconciliation. And the healing needs to happen, I believe, for both, right? And the education.
Myself and 3 of the other Indigenous students were working with Marie Nightbird in a directed studies with a broad topic of urban Indigenous populations. And then I had spoken to her about wanting to work at Wet'suwet'en, the Indigenous Garden. I've gotten more excited about working at the farm and being able to spend more time with elders and realize how grounding that is and how that kind of like changes the level of compassion that I'm able to have with people. So I'm hoping that I am able to kind of carry what I learned and what was meaningful for me to take it out into my practice.
We're marking the 90th anniversary of the School of Social Work. We have a lot to be proud of, but it's also a moment for us to look back and think, what could we have done better? What could we teach students now that would enable them to do better practice?
My biggest takeaway from being at the UBC School of Social Work is the understanding that it's not just one person that makes meaningful change. Meaningful change takes a lot of people working together, and I now feel that I have the tools and the confidence to be a part of that.
Many thanks to Kelly for her excellent work on that, and to the faculty and students who participated. Every time I watch that, I think, who styled my hair with an egg beater that day? But there we go. We never like ourselves when we see ourselves. But thank you very much, Kelly. Our critical reflection also was part of our decision-making process in choosing our 90th anniversary fellow. And we're very pleased to have Stephanie Wahab with us tonight. Can I invite Associate Professor Christiana Bradiotis to introduce her?
Good evening. What an incredible honor to introduce the UBC School of Social Work 90th Anniversary Fellow and tonight's keynote speaker. A brilliant, fiercely passionate, generative social work scholar, a mentor, and a friend, Dr. Stephanie Wahab. Since 2005, Professor Wahab has been on faculty at Portland State University School of Social Work in Portland, Oregon, where she is an affiliated faculty in Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. She holds an honorary research associate position in the Department of Social and Community Work at Otago University in New Zealand. And she is co-editor-in-chief for Aphilia, Journal of Women and Social Work. Dr. Wahab situates her work within critical and post-structural feminist studies of social inequalities. She teaches MSW and PhD courses on social justice, philosophies of science, qualitative research, intimate partner violence, and motivational interviewing. She's long been engaged in sex worker rights and liberation, and has dedicated research and scholarship to these issues. Described by a close colleague at Portland State as a role model and a woman of integrity, she is able to hold complexities, embrace the messiness, and resist. Stephanie is also a mom, a partner, and a sister. She is authentic, generous, and has a heart filled with love. She's funny, curious, and wise. So wise. For a while, we were compatriots, colleagues, and neighbors. Stephanie mentored me through critical developmental pre-tenure years and extended her hand in friendship time and again. She hosted my cat Henry at her home. We carpooled to campus and shared meals and conversation. Delicious conversation. And now it is pure joy for me to share with you the gift that is Dr. Stephanie Wahab. Please join me in welcoming her.
That's never happened to me before, and that was amazing. I hope you all get to experience something like that at some point. Let me pull this up, and I will orient myself. So here I am, here we are. I've been looking forward to this moment, anticipating this moment for months, and it's here. I was talking to my son before we started, and he asked me how I was feeling, and I said I was a little bit nervous, and he said, Mom, just be in it, don't miss it. So happy to be in it and be in this moment with all of you, and I want to begin by extending a deep gratitude for this invitation. I feel humbled to share this time with all of you, and I'm particularly grateful for this invitation to visit the traditional, ancestral, unceded land of the Musqueam. Born in Quebec to a Palestinian refugee father and a Quebecoise mother with settler ancestry, I immigrated to the United States when I was 10 years old, and so I'm here today as a guest and a visitor, and I accept the responsibility to learn from the long history of Indigenous traditions and knowledge on this land. I also want to thank UBC, the School of Social Work, particularly Dr. Donna Baines, and the 90th Anniversary Scholarship Selection Committee, and Christiana, thank you so much for that introduction. That's lovely. I am excited to be here. And before I begin my talk today, I just want to begin by acknowledging all of the people in this room who do social justice, equity, liberation, decolonizing work. I think that work is vital. I think it is underappreciated, underrecognized. It requires a lot of emotional labor. I think it's often invisible, and I appreciate you. I want to acknowledge you. So when I received the invitation to apply, I was invited to propose a talk focused on social justice. And what I decided to do was take that opportunity to think about the fact that I've been teaching social justice courses to social work students for over 20 years, and kind of sit with myself and figure out what have I learned. And so what follows are just some of the lessons that I think I'm still learning through the course of teaching social justice and engaging and stumbling through the work for quite some time. And I'm going to try and share some of these lessons that I've learned by telling a story, or trying to tell a story. And we'll see how that goes. So let's start with this slide here. It's my sons and I. My family and I moved to Aotearoa, New Zealand for 2 years in 2012, where I was working at the University of Otago there. And I was teaching different kinds of courses, and we had a wonderful experience. I made some very lasting personal and professional relationships, and have had the opportunity to go back. And almost to the day, to today, I returned to the University of Otago just a year ago, and I went by myself to teach a 2-week class. And as the plane was flying into beautiful Dunedin, which is on the South Island, where we had lived, I never could have anticipated the depth and intensity of experience that I was about to have during my time there. So towards the end of the 5th day of teaching class, it was an all-day class, An Australian-born white male with white supremacist beliefs and ideologies and a deep hatred of others, particularly Muslim, killed 51 people in 2 mosques in Christchurch while they worshipped. March 15th now serves as a significant temporal, emotional, and social marker for people inside and outside of New Zealand, but particularly inside of New Zealand. Many, but not all, considered New Zealand to be a very safe place, maybe even one of the safest places on earth. And I mentioned not everybody thought and thinks of New Zealand in that way, and I'll talk about that in a moment here. So on March 15th, as I mentioned, 51 people were murdered while they were praying. And this obviously was a tremendous tragedy and moment of deep grief and sorrow in New Zealand. I spent much of the weekend in Dunedin with friends and colleagues and students and people from the community outside of the mosque here in Dunedin. And it turns out that the person who killed these people was living in Dunedin and had actually targeted our mosque as his original target. So over the course of the weekend, we congregated, we sang, we prayed, we served as human shields when the mosque were reopened for people who were returning to prayer. Maori gangs performed traditional hakas outside of the mosques, and imams offered Maori karakias, which are prayers, and there's a lot of time spent in community over the course of that weekend. Now, returning to class on Monday morning, it dawned on me that business as usual and attending to the course content just was not going to be right. And I decided that we would spend as much time as we needed just being together and seeing how people were doing. And I'll begin by saying the class of students was diverse. There were Maori students, there were Pakeha students. Pakeha refers to white settlers in New Zealand. There were also international students. There were some students, South Asian students, Middle Eastern students. And while all of us were grieving and stunned, students' respective experiences of grief were layered, and they were layered or accompanied with a range of other emotions. So we began class by just being together. We sat in a circle, and people were invited to just share what they were feeling and what they were thinking. And as we began, a younger white Pakeha student admitted that she had never thought about white supremacy or white privilege before that moment. Her grief was accompanied by feelings of guilt, shame, confusion, maybe an awakening. Another female Pakeha student, a little bit older, said, "I keep hearing about white privilege, but I'm not privileged. We grew up poor. I don't know what people are talking about." Her grief, accompanied maybe by an awakening of a kind of racial consciousness. A younger Maori student sitting right next to her rolls her eyes and is clearly and outwardly annoyed, exasperated. Then a very quiet Pakeha woman who really had not spoken much throughout the course of the week begins to shake with anger and says, this is not us, this is not us. And as this slide shows, there were slogans and sayings everywhere, in the media, signs posted everywhere, all over Aotearoa, North and South Island, saying this is not us, these events on Friday do not represent us. And just as she is finishing, an older Maori woman stands up and slams her hand on the fist and says, this is us, this is Aotearoa, reminding the class about the murders and killings of Maori people since 1642 and throughout colonization. Her grief, deeply rooted and woven through historical trauma, exhaustion, and anger. There was an international student, a woman from India, broke down in tears and shared that she had never felt welcomed in Aotearoa, that since she was a child she was teased. She told of a story when she was in a park as a young child, and some younger boys were chasing her and telling her to go home, to go back where she came from. Her grief also situated in experiences of othering, of racism, and Islamophobia. I too had a lot of feelings. Feelings about being a visitor and a guest, an outsider during a time of national tragedy and pain. My own racialized and colonized history, connections to displacement, belonging and not belonging, coupled with my own settler and white passing privilege, were activated and quite tender. I've debated long and hard about whether I wanted to share this story, whether it was appropriate to share this story. I debated in part because of my own feelings of tenderness around being there in that moment. I also think that some stories sometimes feel too sacred to tell. I've chosen, however, to weave this experience into my talk because of its lessons for me and perhaps others around the transformative potential of grief and sorrow, as well as the relationship between grief and hope. These lessons, or these practices of hope, have come to me as I've muddled and stumbled, and sometimes more gracefully than others times, learning how to teach social justice content to social work students, while also being complicit and implicated myself in systems of oppression as a social worker, as an academic, as an immigrant, as a settler. Over the course of 20 years of learning and teaching social justice, I have learned that without practices of hope, both in and out of the classroom, my students and I, we are angry, we get frustrated, we feel powerless to affect change. I've learned this same lesson as the daughter of a Palestinian refugee, living in the diaspora. I've learned this as an immigrant, as a queer cis woman, as someone engaged in anti-violence movements for decades. I've learned over time that hope is a choice. So, the focus of my talk today revolves around some of these lessons, which I believe are, or I'm learning, I should say, are practices of hope that I've learned through my own journey of teaching social justice. And they are interrupting extreme othering, seeking and holding complexity and complicity, grieving, and then imagining together. So we live in dangerous times. I hear a lot of people say that, and I think that that's true, but I also believe that these times have always been dangerous for somebody, for some group, for the planet. When I think of danger right now in this particular moment, or just also danger in general, I think of structural violence. I think of white supremacy, I think of settler colonialism, I think of rape culture, capitalism, I think of lack of affordable housing and lack of decent work. John Powell from the Haas Institute writes and teaches and talks a lot about the other. And he mentions that the other is always imaginary, that there is no natural other, and that there is no natural community. He also writes and talks a lot about there are two ways to deal with othering. He talks about bridging and he talks about breaking, where bridging invites empathy, compassion, and deep listening, and breaking sees the other as a threat, sees the other with fear, somehow as attacking who we are. Many of our practices, even those of us doing liberation work and social justice work, engage with breaking, defining ourselves in opposition to the other, even those of us engaged in social movement and social justice movements and social justice work. So what I want to do is just take a minute and just talk very, very briefly, or just mention three kinds. I think there are probably different kinds of extreme othering, but I'd like to just name three of them right here. One is othering people as dangerous. I'll talk a little bit about thinking about the climate crisis and what's happening to this planet as a form of othering. And then I'll mention epistemological othering. So the example I gave about what happened in Christchurch, I think, is one of the more extreme examples of what can happen with profound othering of people, particularly within structural violence. I think that we can look at what's happening in many places around the world, around racism and Chinese people with the coronavirus. We can look at the Muslim ban in the United States, separation of children from their families, and of course the forced removal of indigenous people from their lands due to the gasoline pipeline. I also want to mention, or I did mention, thinking about the climate crisis as a form of othering, where we other and distance and separate ourselves and think of the planet as other. And certainly this kind of othering has profound social justice and equity implications for people all over the world. To understand this type of separation and othering, we must do what Alexis Shotwell and others have called for, which is remembering for the future. That is, remember to stop forgetting. How did land become other? That is property, specifically property of the state and commercial enterprises. How did land and water become entwined in legal fictions that have material effects? She writes. How did land, water, and resources become a commodity to be stolen, traded, desecrated for its resources rather than a signifier of place? Place as relationship. A Sioux theologian and writer, Vine Deloria, wrote about land as an ontological framework for understanding relationships. And if you don't mind, I'll read you this quote. Seen in this light, it is a profound misunderstanding to think of land or place as simply material object of profound importance to indigenous cultures, although it is that too. Instead, it ought to be understood as a field of relationships of things to each other. Place is a way of knowing, of experiencing and relating to the world and with others, and sometimes these relational practices and forms of knowledge guide forms of resistance against other rationalizations of the world that threaten to erase or destroy our sense of place. And finally, the third kind of othering that I just want to mention is epistemological othering. And I think this is a particular kind of profound othering that is, it's unique, but it's certainly prominent in this particular moment. Epistemology refers to how we know, what is knowable, what is truth. And I'd say that these particular dangerous times in this moment are marked by increased marginalization of certain ways of knowing, specifically knowing through place, knowing through the body, knowing relationally, or interpretive ways of knowing. We see evidence of this through the privileging in academic and institutional spaces of evidence that is
only, quantifiable, measurable, often exclusively. We see and feel this privileging in the discourses of evidence-based practices. We see it in the silencing and erasure of indigenous and traditional ways of knowing, in addition to the othering of raced, classed, and racialized analyses of knowledge production. So where is social work and social justice work amidst this profound kind of othering? I'm going to propose, as have many others before me, that we are inside the danger, that we are inside the othering. As Amy Rossiter, Barbara Herron, many others have noted that there's no place of innocence within social work. In fact, social workers often perpetuate and hold up these systems of dominance and technologies of oppression through our attempts at helping. How can we not, given that most of us operate and are dependent on the state and institutions and systems born of colonization and categorizing people, even for our own forms of resistance? Social work and others concerned with freedom and justice must consider our complicity in systems of oppression and domination. So what does it mean to consider that we are inside the danger as social justice advocates, people who engage in social justice work? It means, I think, that we must be, at least to start with, for complexity and for complicity. It means that we must assume that we are most likely not innocent when it comes to holding up some systems of domination and oppression, but rather because of the interconnectedness of all things, we are most likely complicit in these systems that we work to work against. I noted a powerful engagement of this type of complicity and complexity as I read President Santa J. Ono's apology in 2018 to Indigenous people across Canada for the university's involvement in supporting the operations of Indian residential schools and for not doing enough to stop them. Of course, I noted in one of the activities that you mentioned taking on in your 90th anniversary year, but also, in addition, the Canadian Association of Social Work Education statement of complicity and commitment to change. And all I can think is, if only in the United States we could even have these kinds of conversations. In her book, Against Purity, Alexis Shotwell writes, "Consider many of us are settlers living on unceded native land, stolen through genocidal colonial practices. We feed domestic animals more food than starving people lack, and spend money on the medical needs of pets while eating factory farmed meat, and spraying our lawn with pesticides that produce cancer in domestic animals. We pay for cosmetic surgeries in a time when people can't access basic health care. We recycle but take plane trips to Alaska. We worry about global warming and turn on the air conditioning. We think slavery is wrong but eat chocolate and fish produced in contexts that meet every definition of non-chattel slavery. We believe that people deserve good working conditions but buy clothing produced in sweatshops and maquilladoras because we couldn't afford to equitably source clothing even if we could find it. We cannot look directly at the past because we cannot imagine what it would mean to live responsibly toward it. We yearn for different futures, but we can't imagine how to get there from here," she writes. And while Shotwell and others argue that we are all complicit in systems of domination, complicity carries differential weight. That is, we aren't complicit in the same ways, and nor do we benefit from our complicity in the same ways. Holding this type of complexity forces us to move slowly, to think before we cancel or we call out, to look for and forge relationships, including difficult ones. Holding this type of complexity also requires creativity, perhaps imagining that which doesn't exist yet. It calls for collaboration, it calls for recognizing our social and ecological interdependence. It also requires that we care about each other and that we do slow relational work. The problem with purity projects or notions of innocence in our social justice work is that these positions forgo human interconnectivity in favor of narratives of separation and disconnection.
I believe that embedded in the practice of holding complexity, looking for complexity, that in and of itself is an expression, perhaps even a practice of hope. When I reflect on my experience in Aotearoa, New Zealand last year, as well as many other moments in and out of the classroom, I'm reminded of a key ingredient or an element of hope, and that is connection. Be it connection with the earth, connection with her resources, connection among people. While the students in the classroom in Aotearoa, New Zealand expressed so many strong and varied emotions and perspectives, they did it together and they remained present with each other. There was room for people to be shocked, to be stunned, to have light bulb awakening moments, to feel there was room for anger, there was room for frustration, for deep, deep sadness. Eventually our conversation turned to what it would take to be this person's social worker once, he was in prison. How do we as social workers committed to social justice, strengths-based practice, self-determination, and value of all beings having worth, how do we work with people who have committed such great harm? I believe that a requirement is complexity, that is the ability to hold a complex idea, many complex ideas really, that is that humans are capable of all things, all of the most atrocious evil, and then all of the most beautiful love and connection. Starting there creates a pathway for connecting and for bridging. As a guest in Aotearoa during this time, it was an honor to be there with and for colleagues and friends and students. It was an honor to hold truths and realities of extreme othering, of violence, of disbelief, of grief, of shame, of confusion, and it was an honor to feel all of that love and connection and solidarity across all of the different people. The experiences of holding complexity in community cultivated a sense of hope. Hope in the sense of a horizon, that all together we could decide, they could decide the next steps, even if people had different experiences and different beliefs about the meanings of what had happened. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to indulge me for just a minute in a brief conversation with a partner. And if you wouldn't mind turning to a partner and taking turns, maybe just 45 seconds each, and sharing your definition of hope to the person that you're turning to. And if you don't have a definition of hope, if you could share what hope means to you. I wouldn't mind doing that, that would.
thinking about hope and what that means to you, maybe there's something has come to you, I'd like you to watch this video, and I'll introduce this in a moment. And I'm going to invite you to watch it for your lens of hope, and invite you to look and see. My question to you is, where does hope live in this video, or where do you see hope in this video at all, if at all? And this is a video of a silent march that happened a week or so after the massacres. People walked from the university to the Coliseum, where there was a ceremony. It's a brief, it's just 2 minutes. So if you don't mind watching it for hope. Turning to your partner that you were just sharing with, and if you feel like it, if you don't mind sharing where, if anywhere, maybe you didn't, but where did you see hope in this video?
So watching Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, choose to lead the country from a place of grief rather than anger, was an unbelievable and, more importantly, an extremely hopeful experience to witness. Especially as an American citizen, where I've experienced such hopelessness, particularly around issues of gun violence and this kind of extreme othering. The sense of possibility that New Zealanders and their Prime Minister nurtured through their collective open grief and coming together created hope. And it has since had me reflecting on social movements and social change that has come and been born out of grief. I've thought of the Sisters in Spirit movement here. I've thought about Black Lives Matter and countless of other social movements around the world. So we can draw hope from, even create hope through our connections with each other, through building bridges across movements, through recognizing our interdependence, and through decentralizing our power and our organizing. Dr. Angela Davis, who I've had the pleasure of getting to see speak a few times, has said often, as isolated individuals, we will always be powerless. We will never have the means of which to even imagine justice, but as communities, we can achieve anything. We can draw hope from the planet and its ecosystems, as Adrienne Maree Brown urges us to do through her notions of emergent strategy. She uses Nick Oblonsky's definition of emergence as the way complex systems and patterns arise out of a multiplicity of relatively simple interactions. She studies how mycelium grow underground in thread-like formations, gaining force through connections of their roots. She notes how ants and starlings work together en masse to respond to their environments by respecting simple local rules. She admires the extreme resilience of dandelions and their ability to prosper and multiply despite being uprooted and trampled on. We can draw hope from science fiction. Science fiction as a means of exploring new frontiers. Walida Amarisha is a colleague of mine at Portland State University, and she has said that all social justice is science fiction. Science fiction, whether it's Afrofuturism, Arab futurism, Indigenous futurism, shows people of color and Indigenous people as innovators, creators, inventors. It gives us alternative frameworks for dealing with everyday problems. Science fiction can be a fabulous medium for expressing realities and truths that are heavily censored and dangerous to be uttered. Science fiction creates entire worlds that imaginative muscle work helps us strengthen our capacity to vision together. It helps break barriers between the now and the future. I realized a few years ago when I heard Dr. Angela Davis speak at my university, she was speaking about demilitarizing nations and police forces and doing away with guns for police. And I came home and I was telling my partner and my children about it, and I'll never forget the look on my younger son's face. He was so confused and it was just incredulous. He said, "But Mom, what would we do if there were no prisons? What would we do with, the people who harm people?" And I remember in that moment realizing how radical of an invitation it is to try and imagine that which doesn't exist yet, how hard it is, but also how radical it is. So, practices of hope through connection, through dreaming, through imagining, through emergent strategies may support us to work together to repurpose settler colonial and oppressive systems and machines for decolonizing and liberatory purposes. And I'd like to close with a poem that a friend and a colleague of mine from New Zealand, Dr. Anaru Ekitone, wrote, reflecting on our days outside of the mosque. We were Israeli, Palestinian, Christian, Jewish, Indigenous,
British, American, Canadian, Kiwi, Maori. And he told me, we have a tradition of defiant haka in the face of adversity, and that is the space this is coming from. So he wrote this poem: acceptance of others will be our revenge and retribution, tolerance will be our creed, love will be our weapons, and peace will be our legacy. So in conclusion, I'd like to thank the people of the Musqueam Band for this invitation, Dr. Donna Baines, UBC, for this incredible invitation and opportunity. I want to thank all of you who engage in this really difficult and crucial work, and I hope that we can strengthen our bonds to one another so that we might envision that kind of social justice that may not exist yet, that we may think of hope as a will, hope as a way, hope as a horizon, hope as action, and hope as a choice. I'll leave you with this quote from Adrienne Maree Brown: "Live the speed of trust," and maybe we can have a conversation. What do you all think?
So questions, comments, favorite slide? I like the one of the Prime Minister. I don't know if everybody recognized the Prime Minister there, looking very grief-stricken in her headscarf. We could use a Prime Minister like her. It's pretty incredible. Ideas? Reactions? Questions? Yeah.
I just want to say thank you. I'm so moved by this. My research right now is on the mental health impacts of climate change, and so I'm so deeply in working with questions of what is hope and despair. And I'm not sure if I have an exact question, but this speaks so much to that, and it's so crucial, and it felt like a bomb to me. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I also wanted to ask, are you informed by Joanna Macy's work? Because it just seemed like it was throughout this.
No.
Yeah.
No. I've actually been thinking about hope, oddly enough, around my motivational interviewing work. Some of you might be familiar with motivational interviewing, but I think a lot about hope in terms of how, and just in social work practice in general, how do we, what does hope even mean, for one? And how do we nurture it? Where does it live inside of me? Where does it live inside of you? I've been thinking a lot about lending hope. I don't know that we can give hope to people. Maybe we can. I'm unsure about that, but I've been thinking a lot about lending hope. And what struck me about my experience in New Zealand was the feeling of hope amidst such a moment of just utter pain and despair. It still makes me so sad thinking about it. But there was also so much hope in that.
Who's on?
Yeah, so one wants to stand up. Thank you for the lecture, and thank you for getting me to talk with you. Because I was actually forced to think, what is hope? And like I was telling him, that for me, I see hope as a better tomorrow. I always believe, I don't know that there will always be a better tomorrow. And all my life, it's always a better tomorrow. And yesterday has always been better than tomorrow. You know, always been worse than tomorrow. And I keep telling students, always know that tomorrow will be better. And each time I come back and I ask them, what happened yesterday? Is today not better? Is it? Oh yes, today is better than yesterday. And I think that actually has helped me, even as a parent, even as a teacher. And the fact that when this happened in New Zealand, people decided to come together. The fact that they are together means they have hope. Because if they are hopeless, they will not stay at home, thinking that we can't do anything. But the fact that they came together to march, to pray, means that they have hope. And for all of us, whenever we take action, no matter how minute, no matter how little that action is, I think it means that we have hope. And with that, we can actually let go. I think we can let go, no matter how small.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. Yeah.
What you mentioned about holding that place of hope for people who feel hopeless. And I think that's our job at times as clinicians, where you are sitting with somebody who's feeling very hopeless. And sometimes it's just about, you can't give it to them. It's something that they have to grab hold of themselves and realize that there is a future, because future is a place of hope, right? You're looking at change, you're looking at something better tomorrow, right? But sometimes I feel that sense of silence that comes when you just need to sit with a person who feels absolutely hopeless, where it's grief or depression that comes in. And you have no words to say, your words are gone. But there's this sense of deep sense where you are sitting with somebody and you are actually lending, as you said, that place of hope, so that they can then grasp hold of it and take it further for themselves. It's like holding the hand of a baby that's just learning to walk, right? And it just brought me that sense of goosebumps, you know, about how privileged we are to be able to sit with somebody in that place of hopelessness and say, okay, I'm going to share with you in order to get to that next step, so that you can grasp hold of that, you know, that hope for yourself and move forward.
Just that connection.
That connection. And that's what I saw, you know, if people all together with the candles, and that is that place of collective grief, and how much we can really benefit from collective grief through these ceremonies, whatever it is, when people get together in a sense of community. It's so cathartic. It's a wonderful place to be.
Transformative.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a cold, but everyone don't be scared. I was officially cleared to be around other people by a doctor at 2 o'clock today. So we're all safe, but just if I sound weird, that's why. I really appreciated the connection you made between grief and hope. And I don't know if I have a really strongly articulated thing to say about this. I'm kind of sick. But it just really reminded me of my experience after I finished my BSW. I went into the field in Victoria when the overdose crisis was happening. And for so many of us who were on the front lines of all of that happening, it brought out right away, like, if we weren't prepared to grieve, we wouldn't survive. And I think that's so often true for social workers. Everything that there is to be grieved, we're usually pushed to the front of the line to see it. And I think that in a way that's scary, because with everything we will have to grieve maybe coming up, there will be some really big challenges for us. It will be a struggle, I think, for us to survive and support each other. And I think learning about hope is probably a really good way to do that. But then also, what a gift for us to have that practice of grieving and have experienced that, so that we can maybe learn to embody it ourselves and then share it with others. Because the clients who died, who I knew, having the opportunity to grieve for them, I think taught me something that I could never learn in any other way. And so I think as social workers, we also get these opportunities, and that's really special.
So this is really felt for you. Yes.
I think, and thank you for that. I think not only do we have to ask, how do we contribute to hope and move there, but I think the flip side too, what are we doing that's getting in the way of generating hope? And I don't think we ask that side enough.
What thoughts do you have?
Yeah.
Just a question.
I love thinking. One of my favorite things about my job, we get to think with people. So lucky. I love that.
I have some thoughts about what is the root of the hope, where it comes from. That was a very good question. And I'm standing here, I'm thinking, isn't this imagination where it actually grows the hope? Let's say someone sits in the room grieving, as you see sometimes sitting in silence, and imagination, then another person, grieving person, will start to look and see the same thing. And wasn't this is where the hope is being born? I mean, what it was.
Well, what's interesting as I'm listening to all of you is that, I mean, really your sharing, your contribution suggests that hope may live in a lot of places, that maybe hope doesn't just have one source, that hope is in imagination, that it is in looking forward, that it is in connection, that it is in silence, that it is in a moment, and maybe something that we turn to, whether it's inside or out.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that too, because you were talking about speaking to your son and kind of that idea of imagination, and then also thinking about the creativity that takes. And one of my favorite instructors during my MSW had talked a lot about social work being an art and a science. And I guess I was just reflecting on this a lot, kind of thinking in terms of kind of educating future social workers that, and just thinking about my own practice, that I focused a lot on critical thinking, but maybe not enough in terms of imagination and creativity, and how that balance is so important within education and in our practice as well. So it's just something helpful to reflect on.
I think something I struggle with is always the balance between acknowledging pain and suffering, and so being with people in that, and that holding space for hope, so that we're not trying to push hope or not allow people to be where they're at in terms of their pain and suffering. So I think just that balance and what that looks like is always challenging.
Yeah, so not coercing people or trying to nudge them out of their grief or their pain, but holding that somehow.
One thing I've learned on that is the metaphor that I work with is not so much lending hope, but holding someone's hope while they can't feel it. Holding on to it for them. Which at the same time trust that it's there, and it doesn't ask them to feel it if they can't, and if they're not ready. Which I found really useful.
Okay, well, we are just like boring our poor caterers to death. Thank you so much. So I can invite you all to stay for the reception, please. We have lots of food and things to drink. And I would like to wrap up by really warmly thanking Stephanie Wahab for her
having
comments
me.
tonight. And Stephanie's going to be with us until Thursday this week.